Welcome to this study session 1, reading 1 of Ethics and Trust in Investment Profession. Before we move into the video, there is a small disclaimer. Student candidates are advised to pause the video and go through the entire disclaimer. Basically, all that it talks about is that the content herein are my sole property and the CFA Institute has really got nothing to do with it. They do not promote or endorse my product. At the end of the session, the student candidates are expected to know what ethics is, its basic definition, and its emerging role in matters of investment, the need for setting higher ethical standards, a textbook definition of profession, and how do we build trust in our investment profession. Areas where laws, compliance, and ethics work in tandem and where they differ and have conflict. How do we go about building an ethical framework? Let's first get into the textbook definition of what ethics is. It is a set of moral principles and rules of conduct that are expected to provide guidance in our behavior and action. Mind you, it is not only talking about our professional life, but in and around our personal life, it basically talks about our character itself. How do we conduct ourselves, whether in office, at home, or in the social gathering? So there are certain ingredients to demonstrate ethics because ethics cannot manifest in isolation. There are actors and stakeholders. The actors take action on or behalf of the stakeholders in a given situation, and that situation, the actions that are being taken are supposed to be embedded in the guiding principles. So we all are aware of an example which is being quoted in the book also about a research analyst who is covering the pharma sector. Now the research analyst believes through his extensive research that the hold recommendation is appropriate given the dilly-dally situation of the FDA approval, of the impending FDA approval on the certain drug rolling out. However, being pressurized by peers and perhaps being influenced by his seniors, at the end of the day, he actually issues a buy rating. Now, in this example, has he flouted any ethical principles? In this example, is he not being professional? The short answer to this is yes. He has been found wanting in his ethical conduct and he has also behaved unprofessionally. As can be understood, the moral principle, we are talking about the set of moral principles. The minimum set of moral principles that an ethical professional is supposed to demonstrate are honesty, care, transparency, fairness, and reasonable care with diligence. If one goes beyond the ordinary definition of reasonable care and demonstrates higher level of care for his or her client, then it becomes a fiduciary duty. Now, in the given example, the person has not only been found wanting to exercise his own judgment, he also could not delineate the matters of fact versus the matters of opinion. He has also shown poor character, wherein he was devoid of his rational, independent, and free thinking and gave in to the temptation of what peers might think or what seniors might be saying actually might be better than what his own judgment can say. Most of the organizations will have certain written down rules of ethics. Many of them are actually embedded in the compliance of that organization itself. However, we must also understand that ethics is not only about compliance. Ethics goes much more than compliance itself, and in certain cases much beyond the law itself. So governing the code of ethics, there are certain standards of conduct. Reaching office on time is an obligatory thing. Passing on confidential information to a rival firm or in talking casually in a social gathering about your firm's confidential matters is an act of prohibition. Remember, the code of ethics is applicable in both sets, which means both of them are complementary to each other. One cannot exist without the another. Reaching office on time is an obligatory thing. Let's say that you have a deadline to meet and you decide that to brush upon the final last minute touch of your presentation, and in order to do so, you actually reach office an hour before. That is ascension. Ascension is permitted. Anything below the minimum acceptable level of behavior, which is also pegged as a default level, is not acceptable. Profession. Occupation community with specific education, knowledge, skill sets, a framework of practice, and the behavior to demonstrate above. A professional body also fosters mutual respect, trust, and recognition among its peers and practitioners. I think the best example of profession and how profession builds trust in society is that of the medical fraternity itself. Now, regardless of the geography or the boundary, more often than not, give or take here and there, most of the medical fraternity have got certain laid down principles which in general are almost similar. Obviously, there are going to be certain customization depending on a particular geography a medical practitioner is, or the laws that he has to follow. But more often than not, a surgery is a surgery. That's how I look at it. So, if you go by the medical profession, so there are certain SOPs that are defined. Those SOPs build on the normalized practitioner behavior. The medical fraternity as a whole is supposed to serve for the betterment of the society. They are client focused, so are the investment professional. And in order to be a client focused investment professional, you need to demonstrate utmost care, at least reasonable care, if not utmost care, honesty, transparency, fairness in judgment, and diligence in execution, and thoroughness in research activities. Most of the profession bodies require high entry standards that go beyond the academics. Now, the profession of investment is relatively new. The entry standards as of now is still pretty low. There are bodies which are coming up. There are bodies which mandate taking certain exams or taking certain licenses before one can actually earn an entry into the investment profession. But then there are a lot of other things that are required, and obviously these standards will also have to evolve globally. Members of a particular profession are also collegial. What we mean by collegial is that they demonstrate mutual respect even amidst stiff and severe competition. They demonstrate mutual respect for one another. There are recognized oversight bodies, obviously, they would say, or a recognized body in the sense that they can actually delineate what actions are permitted, what are not, and what are the sanctions if there is a violation. The professional bodies are also the ones that encourage its members to interact with the newly inducted professional in their community, as well as the general public in general. There are certain challenges to ethical conduct. As said before, employers and regulators may have standards of practice that are embedded in compliance and that may differ from the ones set by the professional bodies. Now, what are the challenges to ethical conduct? There are basically two challenges. First is internal and intrinsic challenge, and another is a situational influence. Well, with the latter having more impact and more influence over the overall ethical conduct itself. For example, let's take an example. For example, we're talking about, let's say, a research analyst who covers the automobile companies. There is an imminent emission norms that are going to be implemented in the next session. Most of the pundits believe that it is going to adversely affect the automobile stocks, yet this particular gentleman is of the opinion, because of his past success with the automobile sector, he believes otherwise, and he issues a buy rating. That is a mark of overconfidence, and overconfidence shrouds his cognitive reasoning. This may result into losses that are not only monetary, but losses that are perhaps not measurable in matter of trust deficit among clients. Second is the situational influences, which are dominated by the cultural aspect. the peer pressure, the short-term goals and instant gratification, and the reinforcement effects. Let's first talk about the reinforcement effects. Loyalty. Now, loyalty is a celebrated virtue. I'm sure all of you would be knowing, and you are expected to be loyal while you are in a particular employer's office. All of that is fine. But if you're in the investment profession and you're dealing with public's money, your loyalty actually goes far beyond your employer. Your ultimate loyalty must lie with the client that you are serving. And if this has to be upheld, your loyalty to your employer may at times have to be foregone. There is nothing wrong about it. But people who do otherwise are actually victim of situational influence. The next example that I'm going to quote is that of short-term goals and instant gratification. Many a times we are bothered about our next promotion and the next bonus, not to mention of the salary increment. In order to meet your sales target, you do engage into mis-selling. How many times have you come across this situation? I'm not quoting anybody's example in particular, but I'm sure all of you would be knowing in one form or another about that particular employee who has indulged in this. Cultural aspect. Again, this is a classic example wherein the firm as an overall, has a very lax kind of an approach when it comes to meeting the ethical obligation of its client. Peer pressure. Everybody else is doing so why can't I? Researchers and past studies have shown that the main challenges to ethical conduct is not governed by our intrinsic traits, but by the situational influences. So situational influences are a very strong catalyst that prove to be a challenge to carrying out our ethical conduct. Ethical versus legal standards. What is law? Law is set by legislator. Obviously, it varies across jurisdiction and sovereignty. It is subject to interpretation because if it had not so, then we would not have so many cases pending in the court of law. And it also may be an effect of populist opinion. Obviously, it depends upon who is in the ruling. Ethics, on the other hand, goes far beyond law. And as we move along the curriculum, we will understand the CFA Institute tries to establish a common law of ethics. It professes itself to be the largest independent body of investment professional, and the main objective of CFA Institute is to lead the world of investment profession. Hence, it is safe to assume that whatever we are going to study in ethics will be above the realm, over and above the realm of laws of many countries put together. However, as we move along in our next readings, we will come to know that CFA Institute also stipulates that stricter of the two will have to be followed. Ethics obviously require judgment in our action. Some action may sound illegal. Now, here again, I would like to quote an example of, let's say, civil disobedience. The book quotes an example, and I'm just going to exemplify that itself, wherein it talks about, holding the traffic in order to support a demonstration against the new farm bill that has been passed in Parliament. Now, that farm bill might be adversarial to a certain section of the community of the society, and you believe the cause is holy and firm, and hence you have indulged into that protest, or you have extended your support, and that has resulted into public being halted. So that's a matter of civil disobedience. That's illegal. But is it unethical? Well, the answer may not be so. So ethics also requires an ambience, a written down code as we have discussed, a supervisor to educate, enforce, evaluate and monitor, a culture to celebrate, of course, the reinforcement effects. We must recognize, must reward those who uphold the ethical conduct. and encourage others to follow the same. A concern for long-term indelible effect versus short-term gains. This is extremely crucial because most of us are actually myopic in our ethical conduct. When it comes to our ethical conduct, we become a little short-sighted. However, we must not forget at any given point of time that where our rationality lies and to benefit whom. Ethics as an investment decision filter. So, in order to successfully implement an ethical framework in our decisioning, in our action, we must implement it in these 4 pillars. And these 4 pillars may also be considered filters among themselves. The first among that is identify the situation, which means that what are the relevant facts, stakeholders, and the duties owed, ethical principles, and the conflict of interest. Consider what? The situation and influences. As we have discussed before, the situational influences exert maximum impact on our ethical conduct. Are there additional guidance? What are the alternative actions? After having gone through the first 2 filters, then we should be presented with certain alternatives, and we must pick the alternative that is highly optimized, and that is the most optimized. What is meant by most optimized? Well, most optimized means that you decide upon not what is the best, choose not what is the best, but the one that is most conducive to the end client or the one that you're serving for. And at the end of the day, having done all of that, reflect, was the outcome as anticipated? If yes, why? If not, again, why? Now, what to do when you're faced with a certain situation and you're not sure what action should follow? Well, the guidelines suggest that in cases like this, you should first consult your seniors. You may also consult your peers. And if you're still not convinced, or if you believe that there is a room for more judgment to be coming in, you may sound to the compliance department as well. In case the compliance department is also unable to satisfy your query, you may consult somebody else outside the firm as well who is knowledgeable without divulging the facts much, but exemplifying the situation as it may, without divulging, without sharing in the sensitive details. If you are stuck with that dilemma, in such case, you can also consult your peers. So, with that being said, I have compiled a few questions for all of you. I would strongly suggest that please go through the curriculum chapter, try to relate the video content with that chapter, and then attempt the question out here. These questions are developed by me, and I would expect all of you to go through it, solve it, and mail me across your choices, answers. Thank you.